What's something you see a lot of young designers doing? If you can give them one tip of what not to do that you see them doing, especially with students, what would that be?
You can make or break packaging just based on your typeface pairing. That's one thing students definitely struggle more so with because they're not really taught as much, maybe compared to some other concepts and topics in school. So it might just be spending a bit more time on understanding how type pairs well together.
So when it comes to type, what are the mistakes that you see a lot of designers making?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of the mistakes might just come down to,
Dude, you do type and like all sorts of crazy shit, and you do some amazing design. I've had the pleasure of working with you a while back. Who are you and what do you do?
yes, my name is Biersack. I'm a freelance designer, illustrator, typographer. I try to do pretty much everything within the typography realm. So, whatever that may be, it could be calligraphy, sign painting, type design, lettering, the whole kit and caboodle, as they say. So that's pretty much my spiel.
How do you decide to become a type designer?
That's a great question. You just got to be, I guess, obsessed with letter forms. Like that's kind of what happened with me. It definitely started probably my sophomore year of college. We, had a type class. It was very much like painting letter forms by the millimeter, and if you didn't get the right, counterform curvature, you're using, we're painting with placa, and we're painting the positive and negative space. And I think through that sort of like super niche process of painting letter forms, I developed an eye for like the intricacies and the subtleties of creating a letter form. And then it kind of just spiraled. Like I started getting into lettering, and then lettering was like the gateway drug into type design. And I've just followed this path ever since, pretty much.
All right. So you went to school here in Arizona,
Yes, yeah,
and then you shipped out to New York,
that's correct. Yeah. So
right?
I finished up my bachelor's here in Phoenix, and then I told myself like, well, I'm already in this like school mindset, so I might as well continue going to school. And at that point, when I was a senior, I told myself like, I'm like obsessed with type, so I would love to go to the Type of Cooper program in New York City. And that's exactly what I did. So I applied. Thankfully, I got accepted. And then moved out there, did that program for a year, and then shortly after moved back to Phoenix.
Wow, that's right. And while you were there, you spent some time, I think, at Stranger. Is that right?
I was working at Stranger and Stranger for a short time. Yeah, it was difficult to manage both the job and going to school. So I had to make the decision to sadly part ways with Stranger and Stranger and focus solely on school. And that's kind of when I went full-time freelance. Like I just told myself, well, now's the only time I can make this work, as well as like figuring out my school schedule. So I've been freelancing ever since.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when you moved to New York. I was so jealous. Not of moving to New York, but just so jealous of like your commitment to go back to school and like kind of like and just focus on one thing. Like I think like for me as I've gotten older, I'm like, yeah, I'd like to learn this, but man, I know this one thing. I'm good at this one thing.
Right.
I'd like to learn something else, but then it's like, I don't know, you just don't have time. Right. Or
Yeah.
you find like a million excuses not to do it. So like
Oh,
seeing you commit it was awesome.
All right, let's take a quick second to talk about idpdirect.com. Go right to that website, download the design guides, the sustainability guides, the recyclable icon guide, which basically lists out all the different icons. It gives them to you in vectors. You can drop them right into your artwork right now, today, and go right into production. All right, back to the pod.
That was rad, man. So then you were at Stranger for a little bit, and then you've done freelance, and you also teach a type class on Skillshare.
On Skillshare, I'm actually creating one with Domestika right now.
Mm-hmm.
I was just teaching at ASU. The term just ended.
Yep.
I don't know if that situation will continue, but yeah, I've been enjoying the teaching process as well. So I feel like I've reached a point in my career where I can sort of like, give back this education that I have received and try to, help younger students as well. And it's been really rewarding. I really enjoy teaching as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I taught this past semester at ASU.
Oh, nice.
Packaging as well. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was in person. It was my getting out of the house.
Yeah.
Like once a week and seeing
Yeah.
new people. So Yeah, it was really rad.
Which class did you teach at? Like, was it a 300, 400, or like, I'm curious
It was,
where the
yeah,
students were.
yeah, it was a 400. It was in the design building downstairs.
Okay.
You know, like one of those little studios down there.
That's awesome. I'm glad they're bringing you in, man.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good. It was one semester.
Yeah, that's same for me too. One semester, and I was like, okay, that was like a nice intro into it, and I'm curious to see if it will continue on, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's cool. And then you did Skillshare, and now you're doing a class on Domestika. So you're recording that now, or you're kind of planning it out?
Yeah, everything's in the planning stages. I'm gonna fly out to New York again, probably in August is the tentative date to go film everything. And so like that class itself probably won't go live publicly until, you know, honestly next year after all the editing and everything that needs to take place. So it's in the works. It's definitely been a process. We started a while back, and you know, COVID has definitely made it a bit of a challenge. So
yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah.
So all right, so you popped up in my LinkedIn feed, I don't know, like 2 weeks ago or something like that.
Yeah.
Because JKR, you know, they rebranded Magnolia Bakery, and then your post was like, I don't know, that you were stoked that they used your typeface.
Yeah.
But that you didn't know about it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I had no idea. The funny thing is, so the typeface they use is called Gatefold. This is the typeface I started in the Typography program, but I finished it like a year or two after when I moved back to Phoenix. And so this typeface is sold via a foundry. And I eventually, you know, get royalties here and there every couple months and stuff from this typeface, but it's usually like $30 or something. You know, it's like it's a small amount because it is my first typeface. And so I thought like, well, maybe this typeface isn't that good. And one day I got a larger than expected payment, and I literally emailed the guy at the Designers Foundry, which is the foundry that sells this typeface, and I said, hey, is this a mistake? Like I shouldn't be getting this much money because you know, normally I'm so used to these like $30 payments every 3 or 4 months. So like I'm literally making almost nothing on this typeface. And I got this larger than normal payment, and he's like, nope, somebody like bought a bunch of licenses for Gatefold, and that's it. That was the end of the conversation. I was like, okay, cool. And then like probably a month or two went by, and he followed back up. Daniel followed back up, and he was like, hey, just so you know, like here's the link to that, you know, large sum of licenses that was purchased. And he shared the link to I think it was an article on, you know, it might have been the Die Line or something, one of these like bigger publications that shared this rebrand. And I was like, holy shit. Like I had no idea. I just assumed like, oh, somebody bought a bunch of licenses, and I didn't think anything of it. I didn't put, I guess, 2 and 2 together. And that's kind of how I found out. He was the one that shared with me, you know, that, hey, JKR did this rebrand, and here's all the imagery, and like they posted, you know, all the the photography for, you know, all the rad stuff that they designed, and that's how I found out. So
wow, that's pretty awesome, man. Yeah, I'm like, you know, just kind of waking up and seeing your work out there is pretty awesome, man.
Yeah.
So what do you do to follow up? So have you worked with JKR before?
There have been 2 opportunities where I've been really close, where I'm like pitching, or I'm sending out quotes and stuff. So they've reached out about designing typefaces or lettering stuff. So very particular projects, and it just never panned out. And like, even with this thing, like I wasn't associated with it other than like they came in and bought the typeface. So one of these days I'll work with them directly, but yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I was pretty stoked to get a chance to work with those guys a while ago.
Oh, nice.
It's, you know, it's always pretty cool, like when you get to work with an agency that you kind of look up to. It's always pretty cool.
Big shots. Yeah,
for sure.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, it does. So what do you do now? All right, so they used your typeface. Do you follow up with JK and go, hey guys, thanks so much for this, blah blah blah, and like,
oh yeah, I definitely like, you know, I saw the post on LinkedIn as well, and social media, and I had to like reach out to, I don't have any direct contacts there that were working on this project in particular, and so I just like posted on social media and replied to them, essentially saying like, thanks so much, like I had no idea. I appreciate it. And like, as for like following up in terms of other stuff. Like I shared it on social media myself, tagged Magnolia Bakery, and then they saw that I was a part of it, and they reached out and were like, "Hey, we want to send you some goodies." So I got like a bunch of like pudding and cupcakes and stuff. So it kind of worked out nicely, and I had no idea that was going to happen either. They just like were nice enough to send me some treats.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's cool, man. So, all right, dude. So we worked together on a project, and I don't know. I still don't know how the hell you do what you do, right? So, like with type, like the way, like I'm looking at your site. You know, I'm looking at the stuff you've done for Oatly. I'm looking at, the stuff that you did for Atlassian. I mean, pretty much everything. Like, how do you communicate emotion with type, and how do you even know where to start?
Oof, great question. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my bread and butter. I think people realize that I can convey that emotion with type. To boil it down, typography has and can display characteristics that are going to evoke certain emotions. So let's say the type is on an arc and the letter forms are really tall and narrow, and maybe they have like a jagged edge to them. That gives it a bit more life and energy that might feel, somewhat electric, right? And maybe the word itself says the word electric, or maybe it says energy, or maybe it says, whatever that word is. The word itself is going to depict emotion. And then obviously the characteristics of how you're drawing it is going to depict emotion. And so I try to sort of, boil it down to what emotion I'm trying to evoke, and then try to understand, okay, what kind of characteristics would help sort of evoke that emotion? Like, is this letter form going to be super bold? Is it going to be super condensed? Is it super extended? Is it, are the counterforms really, really tiny? There's so many like little nuances of things that you can tweak about a letter form. And that ultimately is going to inform, the look and feel, and ultimately get across that personality and that sort of energy that you're trying to evoke. So yeah, it's hard to say, like, hopefully that sort of like explains it a little bit.
No, not even a little bit, man. Still lost. All right. So like, let's say you've got a small agency, not a JKR, right? Just I don't know, ABC agency, right? And they're looking for, they're doing a small rebrand of a mom and pop shop. When they reach out to you, I guess, should they reach out to you, or should they kind of go through and look for, go through like the design foundry and find a typeface that makes sense for them? I guess, how do you search through all the different typefaces? Because today there's millions, right? Like, I don't know, like when I was going to school, there was like set foundries, and that was it. It wasn't like randomness. It was at the very beginning of like fonts.com.
Yeah.
There's like 100 fonts on there, and that was it. And now it's insane. Yeah. So how does a designer begin to even go through those fonts? Like, how do they figure out what they're looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I get this a lot from students, actually. So it kind of depends on like, what's the personality, what's the vibe we're trying to achieve. And so how I would go about it if I was searching for something very in particular, I kind of have somewhat of an idea in the back of my head of like, okay, I kind of know that, maybe this typeface family is going to be a serif. And so that automatically gets rid of everything else that you have to like sort through, right? So you've got your sans serif, maybe your display typefaces, maybe a script or something, and you're not going to look at all that. So okay, I'm looking for a serif. And then in serif, there's like, okay, I'm looking for maybe reverse contrast, where the thicks and the thins aren't on your left and right, but the top and bottom. Maybe you're looking for something thin and wispy. And so that kind of depends on like, again, like what's the goal you're trying to achieve with this packaging? Who's the audience? What's the age range? Where's it going to live? So all these sort of questions you have to ask yourself will ultimately inform the kind of typeface that you're looking for. So, for example, if you're designing, obviously, like in your case, if you're designing packaging and that it's going to live on the shelf next to, hundreds of other products that look somewhat similar, maybe your best bet is to stray away from everything else that's already on the shelf and design something, obviously, that is going to stick out from everything else. And one of those things may be, okay, well, maybe we have a really bold, condensed typeface that takes up the entirety of this packaging because all the packaging around it might have imagery. And so what if we focus solely on type because these other packages are using illustrations or photography or whatever? And so that could be a way to stick out from everybody else. But, so again, like kind of going back to those questions, you have to ask yourself all these situations of where this type's going to live, who's going to view it, all that stuff, because that will inform, the kind of type that you're looking for. Let's say like elderly folks might read this packaging, but their eyesight might not be as good. So you have to make the type larger than you expect. And if it's larger, maybe you need to set it in a display typeface as opposed to a text typeface. And the difference is there for those of you listening. A display is generally going to have more personality and character. You can get away with a lot of like really nuanced, tiny details in typography. Whereas if you were to take that same display typeface, shrink it down to a text size, such as like 12-point font, and you use it in that size, it's not going to read or look as good. So type designers design a display typeface and a text typeface so that you can use them interchangeably in the right size that they're designed for. So again, hopefully that was like a long-winded explanation to sort of like.
That was good. No, for sure, 100%, man. I know, like when I'm looking at packaging, there are certain things that I don't know. There's certain things that just irk me. Where I'm like, oh, they, it's like so many people make the same kind of mistakes. So when it comes to type, what are the mistakes that you see a lot of designers making?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of the mistakes might just come down to typesetting itself. So, what understanding when to use an N dash versus an M dash or a hyphen.
So, all right. So when do you use an N dash and when do you use an M dash?
Oh boy, put me on the spot here. All right. So what I generally do, an N dash, I believe, is going to be used between dates, 2 points of time. An M dash with an EM is generally like a break in thought. So, a lot of people probably interchangeably use that with like an ellipses, the 3 dots. It's kind of like a break in thought where you can, start a new line, start a new idea, and then continue on with your sentence. And I think generally M dashes are used with quotes. So if you're like quoting somebody, you have your quote up top and you have your M dash and then the person's name that said that quote. I could be wrong. For those of you listening, again, I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong.
Right.
But yeah, stuff like that. Or like if you have like a widow, like a word that's just chilling by itself, and it needs like some other words down there so it doesn't seem so isolated or broken, or like checking the rag on your typeface, or the block of type that you're setting, like stuff like that.
Okay, so when you're setting a block of type and you're talking about the let's say we're looking at the ragged right, what's a good tip that you can give somebody? Like, should the top line be longer or should the top line be shorter? And like what's
I don't think there's a right or wrong there personally, because
yes,
I've used both. So I've used a shorter line on the top, and then you of course like follow through from there, and I've used a longer line on top, and you just got to make sure your rag is even. That's essentially all it is. Like, and sometimes you might have a rag that looks like a triangle, right? And that's bad. Like that doesn't read very well. So it's just a matter of like making it flow nicely. And again, I don't think there's a right or a wrong with like how to start it. It's more about how you finish it, because that's where I see a lot more mistakes, or at least like things that don't look as pleasing to the eye because they might have like a widow or an orphan or whatever.
What's something you see a lot of young designers doing? Like if you can give them one tip of what not to do that you see them doing, especially with students, what would that be?
Obviously, being students, there's so much that you have to learn, and there's so much that you're sort of like taking into account. Because when I was a student, I was like wandering aimlessly, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to type, I would say learn, when and how to use certain typefaces. So it's almost like understanding your typeface pairings, and how to pair typefaces, because that's where you can make or break packaging just based on your typeface pairing. Some typefaces might not pair as well together, and that's one thing students definitely struggle more so with, because they're not really taught, or at least it seems, it's not as taught as much, maybe compared to some other concepts and topics in school. So it might just be spending a bit more time on understanding how type pairs well together.
You know, one site I use is Typewolf.
Oh yeah,
for pairings.
Yeah, he's got great stuff there.
Yeah, for sure. So if anybody's wondering, you know, how to pair things, that's just a good resource.
Yes, highly recommend.
Then in terms of like, you know, when you see a layout, like what's the appropriate number of different fonts somebody should be using, right? Because I see sometimes when unless it's like a concert poster that's like completely crazy, like that's one thing. But if it's, you know, packaging or signage, sometimes when you see somebody using like 4 or 5 different ones, you know, like what are some of your go-to tips?
In my opinion, there's no hard or fast rules here. I know a lot of people might say, you know, keep it minimal, right? Like 3 to 4, maybe 5. But I've seen packaging where they use 10 styles and up, and it works. But the reason it works is because the person that's designed this packaging has an understanding of how these varying typefaces work together. So they're not only like 10 random typefaces, they're 10 typefaces or styles that work and jive together somehow through weight, through width, through, you know, other varying characteristics of the type. And in my opinion, you can get away with stuff like that for very specific projects. You know, obviously every sort of, you know, piece of packaging out there is not going to be able to benefit from that many styles. I've seen it done before, and, you know, it can look good. But yeah, obviously, if you go the minimal approach, 3 to 4, that's like an easy, safe bet. Again, it kind of just comes down to like understanding, you know, what is making them all work together. And a lot of that is just understanding how, again, typefaces pair together through the characteristics that they have. So paying attention to the contrast, the width, the weight, you know, the personality of them, the display, is it text, all sorts of questions to ask yourself. And then, you know, what you could do is just like literally line them up, turn down the opacity of one, and see if like those characters sort of like match, or at least pair in a way where the similarities are more visible. And that's how you know a typeface sort of like pairs with one another, is when probably 3 or more characteristics sort of like align. That's when you know a typeface is going to pair well.
Oh, that's a great tip. Just in terms of looking at how to pair products, how to pair different styles of typefaces.
Cool.
So looking at, no, for sure, dude. And then kind of looking through your work. I mean, I don't know, like looking old stuff, new stuff. You've done a ton of stuff for Oatly. Obviously, this new piece that for Magnolia that they picked up your font. What's been like the one project so far that you're like super stoked about? Obviously, you're stoked about all of them, but like, what's the one that you're like, yeah, this is pretty awesome?
You know, every time I get asked this question, it's always my so when I was a student, I was probably a junior. I applied for this like it was like essentially a contest. They were like, hey, so there's this Girl Skateboards and Adobe that like put on this like contest, and they said, hey, hashtag your work with Make It Girl, which was the hashtag. And we are going to select some people to come out to Torrance, California, hang out with the girl team, design a deck. You know, it was like this whole like package, right? This package deal. And somehow somehow as a junior, I was selected, and that will forever be like my favorite project. And I'm super stoked on it to this day, because everything about it, from the collaboration, the experience, you know, the whole process from top to bottom was like just amazing. And doing that as a student too, like I'll never forget that. It was like a moment I'll never forget for sure. And it's funny, it's not even in my portfolio anymore. I don't think it's on there, you know, because again, like the lettering itself isn't like my favorite, but I still love that project to death. There's something about it that's just like I love, like, I'm kind of like in that. And at the time I was skateboarding too, so like I was like, yeah, I'm designing a deck. Like I lost my mind because I was designing a
Yeah,
deck
for
as
sure.
I was skateboarding too. So I'm like totally into that side of like design. You know, my style sort of lends itself nicely to, I think, like deck design, poster design, that sort of stuff, because I'm just like illustrating everything from the ground up too. So yeah, man, that was fucking awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty rad, dude. I remember seeing that one, and again, being jealous. I'm like, I've always wanted to design a deck, and there's a guy, Tim Barron, that does a ton of decks.
Oh, sick.
He does some killer illustrations. I'm like, fuck, like I would love to do that. But again,
Yeah.
it's like who's got, the time?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you got, you've got to like really commit to getting some of this stuff done.
It's true.
But you don't only do type, so you do a ton of illustration, like you're saying. So like like Facebook, you did stickers for Facebook. I don't know if you can still use stickers on Facebook or not.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Okay.
they're still going. I feel like I've done stickers for a lot of folks. As soon as I did stickers for Snapchat, it was like everybody's like, "Oh, Scott can do stickers." And then I've did so many projects regarding stickers.
And that was like full illustration. So that
Yeah.
was illustration and type. When you're doing something like that, you're designing the type specific to that illustration, or are you designing like an entire typeface for the whole set?
Yeah, it's mostly like, thankfully being a lettering artist first and foremost, that allows me to focus more on the illustration side, because lettering is essentially illustration, because you're drawing letter forms. So when it comes to the projects like that, yeah, we're kind of like coming up with obviously the idea, what's the overall theme, and then kind of running with it from there. So that's kind of where the idea of, like, at least for in the terms of the Snapchat stickers, they were like tattoo inspired, and so it kind of needed to feel, in that vein, at least in terms of like tattoo typography in a way. And then I think there was another pack that was more like psychedelic, and so of course we know we're dealing with like 70s, so that means like, okay, the type or the lettering for this is going to be, reverse contrast, super bold, super funky, all kinds of like those types of 70s characteristics. So it kind of like makes it easy to understand, okay, if I know what the illustration style is, I automatically know what the lettering style is going to be, because you're kind of just trying to match the two, and or at least meld the two so that they feel cohesive at the end of the day.
Have you ever wondered, how do I reduce my carbon footprint? Should I focus on recycled content or reducing weight first? Which design strategies are the most effective for my products? Triac offers multiple solutions for lifecycle assessment, goals management, reporting, EPR fees, and more. Visit triac.com to connect with our team and register for a free 10-day trial of Eco Impact Compass to get started today.
Cool. And I keep hearing you correct yourself when you're using style, letter form, type.
Yeah.
And there was one more. So what's the difference? So that a designer doesn't use them incorrectly.
I mean, I'm using them all the time incorrectly. So it's okay for those of you that are, again, listening, like, it happens all the time because they are so close together and they're used interchangeably. And it's like society as a whole is using them, maybe not the best. Like I probably started on like with computers. A font is considered the very specific nuance of what you're selecting. So you could say the font is Times New Roman 12-point bold. That's the font. The typeface is Times New Roman. So that is the entire family, because let's say in Times New Roman there's 5 or 6 or however many styles. Sure. So that's the family. Lettering is drawing letter forms. Calligraphy is writing letter forms. Type design is essentially a mixture of both, but obviously a bit more digital nowadays because you are plotting points. And did I cover them all? Probably.
I think that was all of them for sure, man.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I get them all mixed up too. Like, it's all the same to me. I don't really care what terminology people use. Like, it's all good.
What's the most underused typeface that you think people should really be looking at today?
I don't really have an answer to that because a majority of the work that I am doing is all lettering focused. So when it comes time to like setting type, I like rarely set type to the point where I'm like, I couldn't even tell you, it's funny. I think being a typeface designer, folks kind of reach out to me. They're like, hey, what typeface is this? And I was like, I have no fucking clue. Like, I have no idea. Like, I'm not that far removed, but removed enough where I still have no clue what typeface is what. And so to answer your question, I have no idea. I truly have no idea.
Oh man, that's crazy. I'm in that boat. I would totally think that I could send you a typeface and be like, oh yeah, this is so and so.
Yeah. It's all good. Like, I don't mind it. I'll try my damnedest to like help people out, but I'm in the same boat. Like, I'll use like my fonts or what the font has or my fonts has what the font where you can upload, like a screenshot of like what typeface you're trying to identify. And there's other identifiers out there too, but I'll use the same tools because I don't know shit.
That's hilarious, man. That's cool, man. Awesome, dude. So what are you working on now that you can share as we kind of start wrapping this up, man?
Yeah, I think more recently, I've been so I'm actually going back to school for music, and I've been enjoying the process, but it's interesting. I only bring this up because it's interesting how the projects I've been getting, for whatever reason, have been more like music oriented. So I just did 4 gig posters for a tech company, even though it's not like for music in the sense of like a band. I got to do some gig posters for a tech company. I did some gig posters for a magazine just like a couple days ago. Finished those up, and I've been doing a lot more like poster related work, it seems, and it's super fun for me because I get to do like some detailed illustration as well as like some super fun lettering too. So it's nice to like design the whole package from top to bottom and really like create a custom piece of artwork for the client. And I really enjoy doing stuff like that, as opposed to like, sometimes I'll do like janitorial vectoring work where they're like, hey, we want you to like, clean up these splines in Illustrator. And like, sometimes I'll do that, right. But you know what I mean? Like that creatively is not as fulfilling as like obviously drawing a custom piece of artwork for a client. So I really love that kind of shit.
Yeah. And that's awesome. It's funny because like, I remember just as a student, you would always think that you would get to draw a lot more posters than you actually do as a professional.
Yeah, it's true. Those projects are like very few and far between. So when they come around, I literally drop it. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. No matter what. Like, I was like slammed with work last week and I was like, yeah, fuck it. I'll figure it out. I'll do it just so I can like, feel creatively fulfilled.
That's awesome, man. And then you're going back to school for music. Like,
yeah,
where does that, all right, so how does that fit in to Scott Biersack 2030?
Yeah, I mean, my goal is so literally one day I woke up and I was like, I gotta make music, and then I was like, shit, I gotta learn how, so that I like I don't know anything. So I didn't take band class. I didn't do any of that stuff in high school, so I'm coming into it very fresh. So I'm like taking music theory 101, and I'm in music theory 201 right now, and a logic production class. So I'm trying to do a little bit of everything. And anyway,
did you buy like some teenage engineering hardware and stuff?
I have a MIDI keyboard. I got a guitar, an audio interface. Yeah. I got all the bells and whistles now. So I feel like I somewhat know what I'm doing. I'm like meandering around still, but yeah, I mean, to like tie it back to design, it's at some point I can see myself like, okay, if I get to the point of releasing music, I'm already a designer, so I don't need to hire out, this design work. So, whatever the album artwork is, single artwork, promotional materials, all that stuff, I think it'll be nice to, be a one-stop shop, if you will, to do it all. And I don't have to sort of like outsource any of that stuff and feel like my, creative touch is, implemented throughout every facet of an album release if I get to that point. That's like that's a big picture 2030 goal, I guess, is like release an album of some kind, but I have no idea when and if I'll get to that point. So
dude, that's awesome. It's what's crazy is you're about the 5th designer in in like like late 20s, early 30s that is moving into music that I've talked to in the last couple of months.
Oh, nice.
Which is like insane, because it's like I don't know. I think again, as you get older, you're kind of like, oh man, I got this one track, and it's such a different mentality of like, oh, I'm really interested in this. I'm going to go learn this, and you actually go and you actually do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I do really well in school environments, which is why I signed up for the Berkeley program. And I just told myself, like, if I'm going to learn music, I gotta go back to school. And, you know, I've been doing it for about a year, almost a year now, which is nuts too. And yeah, I mean, like, as creatives, I feel like we have so many outlets of creativity. And for me personally, it's not just design and lettering, you know, it's cooking, it's woodworking, it's whatever. Like, you know, there's so many ways that we can express our creativity. And I think thankfully now music has like become my new hobby. And I'm like crazy serious about it. Like, I could see myself potentially just saying goodbye to design forever. And
that's
just,
insane.
Like, yeah, like I'm pretty serious about it, man. So it's been fun.
That's awesome. That's cool, man. That's awesome. Awesome, dude. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up, dude. You are people can find you at youbringfire.com.
Yeah, that's right.
And they can see all of your work. They can reach out to you via the site. I definitely implore anybody that's listening to check Scott out. I mean, your work is awesome, dude.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
and it's not you don't have like one specific style, which I think is what's great, is that you have a lot of range. So
thanks.
Anybody can reach out to you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I try to be more of a generalist in terms of like, you know, not focusing in on one particular thing. Because again, I get so bored, and then creatively I need to like express myself in so many other styles. So yeah, for those of you listening, I can tackle anything you throw my way. So reach out. And yeah, thanks, man, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.